Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Accuser, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you're joining us live, super happy to have you. Let us know where you're watching from. If you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I have it pulled up here. Try to do my best to keep an eye on it, see if we can kind of get a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, why not subscribe? We're trying to build this community, slowly but surely growing it out. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes down in the description, so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. But those of you watching live, you're stuck being bound to the laws of space-time. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and like I said before, don't forget to like, and please do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was a little under $74 million, which was a basically even Steven from where we were last week. I forget, I double-checked the number. I was like, did my formulas calculate this right? A 0% change? I did compare, and I forgot, hold on, sorry, I just got a message from somebody. I was concerned that maybe, I fucked up the formula somehow, but I did double check it and noticed that it's basically the same, though the fact that this zero is in red leads me to believe that it must be negative 0.01%, something really small. But it's still technically less than last week, but still basically held exactly where it was, though not the biggest accomplishment in the world, considering last weekend was pretty poor, considering it was Oscar weekend. So, take all of that for what you will. Biggest new movie here, we got Mickey 17 opening at number 1, which was good to see. This is Bong Joon-ho's, follow-up to his critically acclaimed Parasite. This brought in a little over $19 million, which is good, right? It not only fell within the projections, but actually exceeded my target of around 18. And I can't remember, let me do a little quick math here. I can't remember how Parasite did overall. So, the budget of Parasite, when converting it into US dollars, was around 11 million, and box office made around 258 million, right? So that was very successful. It's not looking like this is gonna be as successful, right? Because just by nature of the fact that it's 10 times the budget, whereas that was 11.4, this is $118 million. So right now it is very firmly in the red. It's definitely been getting good reviews, but Bong Joon-ho's films have never been huge box office powerhouses, and this really feels like kind of a blank check movie, right? Where after winning Best Picture, any and every studio was excited or eager and willing to get him, make his next film, because they're hoping lightning will strike twice. But if you know anything about lightning, it rarely strikes in the same place twice, right? Again, not to say this isn't good, but I haven't seen it, but I'm suspicious or doubtful that it's going to have the kind of percent return that something like Parasite had. I think at this point, seeing kind of a semi-weaker opening, it did open at 53 worldwide, so most of its money is coming from overseas, but even still, I think right now the name of the game is just to at least make $118 million, and then if so, great, and then go from there and worry about that. Also opening this week, right at the very bottom, just one spot above the bottom, I should say, at number 9, we have Rule Breakers. This is a Christian film, or at least it's being distributed by, I believe it's Angel Studios, what is it's about the first girl, what is it? It's about the first female robotics team in, I'm totally blank, it's not coming up where it takes place. It's I want to say Iran or Afghanistan, but I feel really ignorant just saying one of those, so now I have to know. Rule Breakers in a nation, or maybe it's not specified what country it is. Maybe it's just supposed to be like vague, vague fundamentalist Islamic country. Those evil Muslims over there, as some fundamentalist Christians might say. Of course, I'm not saying that. This was much more disappointing, right, than Mickey 17. It only brought in about $1.5 million, falling below even the low end of the projections of 3 to 6. I put a target on 4, so definitely a disappointment. Don't have budget numbers on this though, so that's the thing, right? I mean, this could be low in terms of what people were expecting. I can't imagine it was made for less than $1 million, so I would imagine it's still in the red. But again, with a company like this, I think they build into their business strategy the ancillary markets, right? Like rentals and streaming and physical. Especially, I feel like physical is big for movies like these because physical there's only two kinds of people who buy physical media anymore: cinephiles, I guess you could lump me there, and people who are behind the times, right? So, which, the Venn diagram of fundamentalist Christians who would be really inspired by a movie like this, and people who are behind on technology, there's some overlap there on that Venn diagram. So, I wouldn't, if I were the makers of this film, I wouldn't freak out necessarily, but it's definitely a little disappointing because even if the expectations were low, not being able to even meet those low expectations, is concerning, right? Or at least disappointing, right? And I believe it made all of its money domestically. Like, I don't even think this is playing anywhere else. Because again, it very much caters to like an American worldview of like those evil countries over there. They don't let women. They don't let women learn about robots, which is maybe true, but, it's not like we are super encouraging of our women here in this country. Looking here in its second week, Last Breath held its third place spot. This is the Woody Harrelson thriller, being, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, in a sense, right? This brought in a little under 7 million, only a 15% drop, so that's actually really good. But again, considering how poor, or how historically low Oscar weekend is, it's not like a huge, it's nothing to write home about, but maybe tell someone nearby. This analogy is starting to fall apart here. So, so far total, it's made a little under 15 million worldwide, but again, off of like an almost $24 million budget. So it's still in the red. I'm not sure, if it still has some markets that it needs to open in. But again, this is where, again, it's still only the second week, but this is where I would start getting a little concerned, right? But this is mostly, again, this top 10 is mostly just a continuation of weeks past. We have The Monkey here dropping from second to fourth place. Now in its third week, bringing a 6.4-ish million. Pretty, not big drop, but compared to everything else here, about a 40% drop. Though the key thing here is the ROI, right? So it's made almost 46 million worldwide off of just an $11 million budget. This, of course, is the follow-up from Osgood Perkins, his follow-up from Longlegs, which itself was a huge box office powerhouse, at least when it came to, like, again, that percent return. It seems like we're continuing the trend here. An over 300% return, which is really great to see. By contrast, Mufasa the Lion King, which has been like this big success story in a sense. This is its 12th week in the top 10. Dropped from 6th to 8th place, made about 2.4 million. This has been successful in the sense that it's just been, look at the legs. It's just been sustaining itself week after week after week, making more than $700 million. But since it was made for $200 million, it has a lower percent return than The Monkey, right? So what that means is every dollar that they put into The Monkey, they're making more money off of that $1. So, 700 million, 700 minus 200. So, a $500 million profit, that's pretty good. But, maybe it would be better if you just made a lot of smaller movies and divvied up that budget. if obviously there's the creative argument for that, but just purely from a business standpoint, you diversify. I mean, there's a reason why they call these movies tent poles, because in a tent, if you knock out a tent pole, the whole thing comes down. Like, there's only like one huge failure can really hurt your bottom line. So, it's really encouraging to see something like The Monkey, which I guess hasn't been getting great reviews, but it's still performing well. It has its niche audience, and they're showing up, right? Which in this state of the American box office and theatrical exhibition, environment, that's really encouraging to see. Captain America Brave New World dropped out of its first place spot down to 2. Now in its 4th week, brought a little under 13 million. A 42% drop. This is at least now finally truly profitable, right? Because you don't want to just make back the budget. You ideally want to double the budget to cover marketing and advertising costs, which aren't usually included in those budget numbers. So it was made for 180 million. Worldwide now it's made over 360. So now it is officially in the green. We could consider this profitable, quote unquote. But again, considering where Marvel was in terms of its movies 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, 5 or 6, right before the pandemic, I'm sure this is really disappointing, especially off of the sugar high that was Deadpool and Wolverine from last summer. Though I think if Disney and Marvel were kind of using Deadpool and Wolverine as a potential comparison, that was foolish, right? Because there's just so many, it's like comparing apples and oranges, right? Deadpool and Wolverine was a multiverse movie. It had Hugh Jackman returning as Wolverine. It's a Deadpool movie. People love Deadpool. It was kind of a swan song for Fox's Marvel properties. Summer. It was a summer movie. It kind of was the end, the big climax of the summer box office season. So it's not really fair to compare this to that, but again, this should definitely be getting Marvel worried, and I think it's just another testament to just people are tired of the same old from Marvel, which is why I think a lot of people, myself included, are excited about the new Fantastic Four movie, because it's not just new characters, but it's also it seems, I don't want to say stylistically different, but maybe I do want to say stylistically different. It feels like I'm getting a different offering, different from what we've just been getting. I heard someone compare it where it's, Marvel's kind of become like McDonald's, where it's like you're gonna get, no matter where you are, or whether you're in Texas or New York or a fort like Spain or Tokyo, wherever you are, a Big Mac is gonna more or less be the same. But because of that, it's all homogenized and it's reliable, but not necessarily, it doesn't really inspire the soul the way that, a really good hole-in-the-wall burger place, right? So I think Marvel is probably a little worried, but they're definitely going to be looking to see how does Thunderbolts do in, I think it's May. And then really Fantastic Four is going to be like the big test case. Let's see here. Dogman still in the top 10, though it did drop out of the top 5 from 5th to 6th place, but now in its 6th week, right? 4.5 million. Again, this is also profitable. This is one that you're really seeing a lot of strong players that are just in the top 10 for weeks and weeks and weeks, which is encouraging to see. Though really cool, and I kind of predicted this. One of my few predictions that I actually have gotten right is Nora jumping into the top 10, right? Of course, Best Picture winner, huge sweep at the Oscars, 5 awards for the film in various categories. Jumped from 22nd place to 7th place, a 547% jump, right? Again, only like $2.4 million, but this is why award season is so important when it comes to business, if you were like a studio executive, because films that get nominated get a little bump, and then films that win awards also get a big bump. And look at the ROI on this, right? So it's only made about $47 million worldwide, but it was only made for $6 million, right? So this is a very, very chunky if I could be so bold and use that adjective, it's a very chunky ROI, right? And again, I feel like we would all be better served if we just made a lot of cheaper movies than a bunch of 200, 100, 150, $200 million movies, right? So a very interesting top 10 this week. March is certainly not the beginning of the box office season. It's kind of like, it's not the beginning of the summer box office season, but I feel like the summer box office season is kind of like Christmas, where it's like every year, and maybe just because I'm an adult, but it's like every year it feels like, or every holiday, Halloween, Valentine's Day, it's like you start seeing the decorations earlier and earlier, like the stuff at Walgreens or Walmart or whatever, right? The fact that the summer box office season does not start, not in June, but more so May, and sometimes actually more like late, middle, or even early April. So we're definitely not there yet, but we're getting closer. So we're going to definitely be seeing a lot more bigger openings. But this upcoming weekend is, like I said, is not one of those. So coming ahead, we have Novocaine. This kind of action, I think this is like kind of an action comedy with starring Jack Quaid. Where I guess he's becomes a hitman, kind of like a John Wick style thing, but the whole idea is that he can't like get hurt. This is projected to make around 6 to 12 million. I'm gonna put my target right in the middle at 9. Again, the fact that this is our biggest movie coming this weekend, and we're barely cracking like the 10 million range, kind of speaks to the moment, if you will, right? Then we got Black Bag. This is projected around 5 to 10. I'm gonna put this around 7. This is a Steven Soderbergh film. It's like a spy thriller. Soderbergh just is one of those directors who just pumps out a lot of stuff, and he's made a lot of really great stuff, but also a lot of just good or okay or whatever kind of stuff. So, again, not really projected to make all that much money. Then we also have Opus. It's an A24, I believe, film. Oh, where is this? I wanted to pull something up about it. Here we go. It's an A24 film. It's a thriller. It's like, I feel like, I saw the trailer for it, and it kind of just looks like your standard A24 social thriller in a sense. I don't really know all that much about it, but it's projected to make around 4 to 8 million. Again, I'm gonna put my target right in the middle, and put it around 6. Again, pretty small opening, all things considered. And then one that's is good and bad to see. We have actually a Looney Tunes movie called The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. Aptly titled. I believe this was a movie that was not going to get released. It was going to kind of be like Coyote versus Acme. But luckily it's being released. But it's not going to do very well. So I don't know. I forget if Warner Brothers is distributing it or if they kind of found someone else to do it. But whoever's doing it decided not to put a lot of money into the marketing, because I have not seen anything about this movie, and because of that, I'm assuming it's not really going to make much, and that's where the projections are, right? Around 2 to 5 million. I'm going to put my target around 3. Okay, before moving on, just want to give a quick plug to another YouTube channel I have called Replay Rewind. 1,000 video games across 50 years of gaming history. Can I play them all before I die? Well, we're going to find out. It's my attempt to play through all of these iconic games across gaming history, like I said. I've done about 4 of them so far. It's pretty simple to get through them because they're really short, obviously. Starting in the early 70s, now we're starting to get, I think the next one I'm doing is Zork, which is going to be fun. So definitely go check that out. It would really, really mean a lot to me. You can find the link to that down in the description below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 1. So, tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on goods from countries like China and Canada and Mexico are poised to disrupt the American gaming market, right? IGN notes that these tariffs may impact the price of, games themselves, as well as the consoles, and not only the price, but potentially even the availability of these games and consoles, right? So let's take a step back for the uninitiated, right? So what are tariffs? It's essentially a tax on imported goods. So the idea is, let's say I'm a company and I make I build buildings, right? And I want to get I want to use steel from China. If there's a tariff, I then have to pay to the U.S. government as the importer this tax, whatever it might be, 10%, 20%, 25%, whatever it is. And that money then goes to the U.S. government. Notably, I feel like a lot of people get confused about this. The tariffs are not paid by the foreign company or the foreign business. It is paid by the importer. So it's essentially a tax on American businesses. And I mean, not to say that it wouldn't impact the foreign company at all, because, supply and demand, the foreign company may decide that they have to lower their prices, otherwise American buyers won't buy. That's usually not what happens, right? The idea of tariffs, or why you would theoretically implement tariffs, particularly protective tariffs, is to protect domestic industry. So the U.S. government puts tariffs on imports of steel in an attempt to strengthen American steel producers and manufacturers, right? That's the idea in theory. What often happens is that companies then just pay the tariff, but then the price increase, essentially, or like that extra cost, is more or less passed on to the consumer. So, if I'm gonna make something that I need something that I need to import, and I sell the thing for $400, but now I have to pay this extra money, I might just kind of add that what I just had to pay onto the thing I'm now going to sell, right? So usually, right, just broadly speaking, tariffs have the most impact on consumers, and they rarely, I don't want to say rarely work, but they typically do not have the intended effect that they are meant to have, and or they don't have the effect quick enough for the politicians who put the tariffs in place to withstand the blowback, from public opinion, right? So, looking at this situation, Trump's tariffs here are a 25% tax on almost all imports from Canada and Mexico, are two of our biggest trading partners, so that seems like kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, as well as a 20% tax on goods from China. Of course, Trump loves China, talking about China. So I think, needless to say, I could probably just end the video here, but needless to say, this is going to impact a lot of industries, probably every industry, either directly or indirectly, because even if your company, you don't import anything from these countries, you probably buy products from companies that are importing, right? And gaming is one of those industries that is going to be directly affected, right? Target and Best Buy have already been signaling, trying to get people ready, like we might have to raise prices on some of these items, because, the gaming industry is this complex web of supply chains, right? But to boil it down very simply, most of the hardware used in console manufacturing happens in China, right? And physical game discs are often manufactured en masse in Mexico. So that creates a big problem, right? I got a quote, I think it was IGN talked to a analyst from Nico Partners named Daniel Ahmed, and his suggestion is that this is not catastrophic, but it's still bad, right? So some companies have been proactively trying to get ahead of this, by either slowly raising prices, so it's not like a huge shock to the system, because Trump has been talking about this since his 2024 campaign. So companies have been slowly increasing the price so that consumers don't have like that sticker shock once these tariffs go into place. And a lot of companies are also moving production out of somewhere like China into Southeast Asia, these other countries that aren't being targeted with tariffs, right? That being said, though, even with these measures, Ahmed says 75% of consoles, video game consoles, are still imported from China. So again, the market is very much heavily exposed to these countries, that it's now going to be a lot harder to do business with, right? And notably, this could have a major impact on the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, which is supposedly coming this summer. Like, some people are saying June, maybe July, at some point this summer. So not that long. This is like a couple months from now. Original projections by analysts were predicting that the Switch 2 would cost around $400. Now it might be higher. Again, this is like a major console launch. Right at the same time. It's like the worst timing ever. I bet they're probably wishing they had done it for this March, which seemed like they might be doing, but I guess they had some issues and they had to push it back. So, again, this could have very, very tangible downstream effects. Circana analyst Matt Piscatella says, in addition to the console issue, going back to the discs being manufactured in places like Mexico, this may lead to, or rather, should I say hasten, because it's already happening, this may hasten physical game sales dropping, right? This is what publishers want anyway, because publishers, when they, if they sell a game for $60 physical, it's going to be $60 digital, right? There's no difference in price for the consumer, yet the physical is more expensive to make for the publisher. Obviously, you have the discs and the packaging and all of that. So publishers, that's why publishers and video game companies have really been pushing people to buy their games digitally, because there's very little overhead costs. So they get a bigger share of that, of that sale. So this is what publishers want anyway. So, I'm sure a lot of companies will just use this as like a convenient excuse to scale back their physical game disc production, which is really a shame because of just media preservation concerns. But that's a whole can of worms I won't bring up now. But all this to say, this is unfortunate because gaming is already an expensive hobby, right? We talk about how expensive movie tickets are, but one movie ticket in even the most expensive city is like $20. Most video games are $60, now closer to $70. You also have to buy the console. Like, it's not like just having a DVD player where you can just watch any movie. You have to get specific consoles for, you have to get specific consoles in order to, play certain games. If you're a PC gamer, you need to constantly be updating your components to get the best results. So it's already a huge time and money commitment, and this is only going to make it worse. And I got a quote here from that analyst, Matt Piscatella, saying, quote, "As gaming continues to get more expensive and as prices in everyday spending categories increase, this trend isn't likely to improve. As audience size retracts, the only way to get to growth is to get each remaining player to spend more. Of course, this is much more difficult to do as that same audience is asked to spend much more on everyday spending categories like food, shelter, and utilities. Needless to say, making gaming products more expensive at the same time isn't likely to help," end quote. So, definitely, if you're part of these companies, you should be concerned. Now, that being said, this is Donald Trump we're talking about, so God knows if the tariffs could be reversed tomorrow. Like, who knows? But, as of right now, the stock market has not liked, just in general, beyond gaming, has just not liked his economic plans. Like some of the worst, basically all the gains that have been made since he was elected in early mid-November have been erased. And I know that by reading financial articles, and I also know that by just looking at my own stock portfolio. So it's definitely going to be an interesting situation going forward, especially for us gamers, the most oppressed group of all, as we know. All right, before moving on, I just want to give a quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all that good stuff. It's been a lot of fun. Definitely go check that out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. And you can also just find us in the link down in the description below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 2. So Paramount Global and CBS are seeking to have Donald Trump's $20 billion lawsuit against them dismissed, saying, quote, plaintiffs President Donald J. Trump and Representative Ronny Jackson, public officials at the highest ranks of our government, seek to punish a news organization for constitutionally protected editorial judgments they do not like. They not only ask for $20 billion in damages, but also seek an order directing how a news organization may exercise its editorial judgment in the future. The First Amendment stands resolutely against these demands, end quote. So, of course, this is all in reference to the interview that Kamala Harris did for CBS's program 60 Minutes, right? This was back in October in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election, which, of course, as we know how the rest of it played out, right? Where they got into hot water, really, I should call it mildly room temperature water, because it's really like no one really cares except like MAGA people and like Trump world. But essentially, the CBS used one portion of her answer for like a promo of the program, and then another portion of her answer on some question for the actual program. So Trump went, claimed that this was false advertising, but more importantly, this was election interference in an attempt to make Kamala Harris seem more coherent and well-spoken, and saying that, I'm suing, again, for $20 billion. CBS was quick to point out that, this kind of editing is very normal in broadcast television. And Paramount put out a statement saying, quote, the answers that aired on each news show were simply excerpts of a single answer Vice President Harris gave to a single question, and taken together, viewers heard virtually all of Harris's answer, end quote. There was this whole back and forth of like, release the transcript. And they were like, no, because this is just what we like this is not a weird scenario. They were like, aha, they have something to hide. And then they released it. They were like, okay, fine, here's the transcript. And there was nothing incriminating about it, right? So, again, it's a big nothing burger. But again, the reason why this is important is because now Trump is, if Kamala Harris won, this would still be an issue, but it would not be as much of an issue. But Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States, and he doesn't quite, let's just, to put it mildly, he doesn't necessarily respect traditional norms of what's appropriate in terms of your use of presidential power, right? I think we can all agree, even if you like him, right? I wouldn't say he's very traditional when it's staying within the bounds of what has typically been acceptable, right? So this is a concern for CBS's parent company, Paramount Global, because they are set to have a huge merger with Skydance Media, which I covered on this channel extensively. You can find all my videos about it, because it was this huge, long saga, this drama. It was this long and drawn-out process. And they finally figured something out. But now it might be in jeopardy, right? Trump may, and he kind of already has, and I'll talk about that in a second, but Trump may direct his surrogates within the government to do what they can to block the merger, essentially as retaliation for, CBS, because really this all boils down to the fact that 60 Minutes also extended an invitation to interview Trump, but he declined because they were like, we would fact check you if you said stuff that isn't true, and he was like, I don't want to do that. So he wants to either retaliate, or he wants to use this as a bargaining chip to settle out of court for obviously less than $20 billion, but still make something, right? And again, I said he may direct his surrogates, but again, it's already kind of happening. And the FCC, led by a Trump appointee, has opened up an investigation into claims of news distortion. CBS put out a statement saying, quote, the complaint filed against CBS for news distortion, their quotes, not mine, envisions a less free world in which the federal government becomes a roving censor, one that second guesses and even punishes specific editorial decisions that are an essential part of producing news programming, end quote. It seemed possible, if not kind of likely, that Paramount, in order to make sure this merger went through, it seemed likely that Paramount would just settle out of court, which many viewed, as at best a payout to appease Trump, and at worst a flat out bribe, right? Though the reason why I'm talking about this story is because it seems like that has not happened. That Paramount, CBS are very vocally pushing back. I don't know, the inner workings of, because Sherry Redstone, who's still in charge of Paramount Global, her political leanings aren't very clear. She is an observant Jewish woman, very pro-Israel. But other than that, we really don't know much. I believe she's donated to both Democrats and Republicans in the past. So I can't speak to her feeling some kind of way. But I think the company as a whole did not want to seem like they were just giving in to Trump, especially the CBS side of things. The liberal media, if you will, they really see themselves as the resistance, right? The fourth estate, as they say. So I think they really did not like the idea of settling with Trump just to get this merger through. But again, overall, this just reflects, this is only the beginning of things like this. And this isn't even the beginning because, we already had issues like with ABC settling with Trump for a defamation lawsuit that they could have probably won in court, but they didn't want to go through the hassle of being targeted by the president of the United States, right? So basically what's going to happen now is that companies are going to have two choices. They will either have to acquiesce to Trump and appease Trump, or they're going to have to stand up to him, right? And I've talked about this a lot on the channel that, Trump, people are like, oh, Trump's going to become Hitler. He's going to be a fascist dictator. Perhaps. But, at least for the time being, he doesn't have to violate anyone's rights if people just do it for him, right? He doesn't have to censor CBS and violate their First Amendment rights if companies like CBS if they just censor themselves. So, excuse me. But that's the rub, right? That's the challenge of our moment is, we can't make it easy for him. That, if he wants CBS to be silent, he's gonna have to far exceed the limits of what the Constitution allows, because it seems like CBS and Paramount are at least suggesting that they are not going down without a fight. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Oh, actually, before moving on, Lorenzo Fletcher Productions, good to see you, says, update, new Paramount company to be called Paramount Skydance Corporation. Oh, they just announced it? Oh, man, the breaking news while I'm doing it. Okay. Maybe I'll do that as a story next week, but I was kind of hoping for new Paramount, just because it's, so silly. But anyway, let me grab another drink here, so. And Vivian, to answer your question about Anora being on streaming, I think you can rent it. I don't know if it's available to stream anywhere yet, for free, on a service that if you pay a monthly subscription. But you can rent it. But yeah, let me see here. So let's talk about story number 3. So Pixar's Disney Plus show, Win or Lose, is making some news, more news, right? And we'll talk about the old news. The show's making some news because it has featured Disney's first Christian character in almost 20 years. Of course, this is the Pixar show, original show. It focused on a co-ed middle school softball team named the Pickles. And the character in question, pictured here on screen to my left here, or at my right, your left. This character is Lori. She's the right fielder of the team as well as the daughter of Coach Dan. And the whole show is built around this idea of kind of following each character and kind of seeing their perspective on things and their inner life. And it's very expressionistic in that way. And the episode of her character is introduced with her beginning with quote unquote Heavenly Father, right? And Disney's has had a touch and go relationship with religion, but more specifically Christianity, right? I shouldn't even say touch and go. I should say a seemingly paradoxical relationship. Because on one hand, again, it's rarely explicit. But at the same time, Disney as a company, having been founded by, white American men a century ago, all of the company's work is infused with just a generalized American Protestant worldview, right? You know, and it's not even like, oh, they're sneaking in Christian themes or anything. That's not what I'm saying, but more so that, you know, the dominant power within like a group. So like, you know, I guess what would be the opposite of marginalized communities? I don't want to say the oppressor communities, but perhaps, right? Like, they often, and I could say this, and this is something I've had to unlearn. I myself am a straight white Christian man, right? That you kind of assume your state of being is the default, right? So, and that's like the classic, like if I'm telling a story and it's about a white guy, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. But if it's about a black guy, you'll be like, oh, this black guy, right? Like as if whiteness, manness, Christianness is just the default and doesn't even bear acknowledgement in a sense, right? So it doesn't explicitly ever really depict Christianity or explore ideas related to Christianity, but it's never really presenting Jewish people or Muslim, you know, characters, right? Again, they've been doing a little bit more recently, but it's on the whole, right? The last major Christian depiction in a Disney film was 2007's Bridge to Terabithia. You know, the main characters at one point in the film attend church together, and then they discuss religion. Of course, in a accessible, in a way that would be accessible to children. Notably, though, that film was not like a Disney invention. It was based on a pre-existing book, and that was an era when Disney, again, did not, you know, was still struggling to kind of, you know, figure out its identity in this period. So, you know, that's kind of almost moot. You know, you know, not a super helpful example. So, Peter, why are you talking about this? Who cares? Well, this is interesting to see. Especially, you know, I, like, full disclosure to my viewers, I am Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I consider myself fairly devout. I consider myself, though, a leftist, right? So, which a lot of people feel like it contradicts. Like, if you're a Christian, you must also be conservative, and that's not me at all. But that's also not because I'm on the left, that means I compromise in Catholic values. Like, I have this weird, I mean, if you really want to know, you can ask me about it, but, so I say all this to put front, like, I am not, you know, hating on Christianity, right? I'm not just someone who is Catholic. Like, I am still consider myself very devout, and it's something that's really important to me. But this feels hypocritical, because if you recall, and you can find my video about this on the channel, I did it on Christmas Eve, no less. This show made news before its release, because right before release, they removed a storyline involving a transgender character from this same show. And at the time, Disney and Pixar said, quote, "When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline," end quote. This is 100% politically motivated. You know, I talked about it in that video. I've talked about it in some other videos about Disney recently, especially their move, along with many other American corporations, of abandoning DEI efforts and diversity and things like that. You know, that in this new climate of Trump being reelected, either to avoid attack from Trump or to cater to what seems like an American majority, Disney would rather cater to conservatives and Christians and throw trans people under the bus, and queer people in general. And there's a lot of examples within the past year of Disney actively playing down queer elements in their media or actively removing them. And you know, this, again, I'm going to read this quote again. And if you've watched my channel before, you'll know how I feel about this, but I'm going to explain it again for anyone new out there. Quote, "When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline," end quote. Again, there's a lot to unpack there. And it goes back to what I was saying about centering a certain kind of identity as the default. It's default to be a man and identify as a man, or a woman and identify as a woman. It is other to be trans. So that's number one. Number two, this reinforces this idea that discussing things like being queer, or being gay, or being trans, or just issues with race in this country, oh well, we don't want to, that's not appropriate for our kids. Especially again talking about transgender people, that's not appropriate, which would suggest that being transgender is perverse. Now, plenty of people think that, but then you're just transphobic, but then just own it, right? But people try to use euphemistic language of like, parents might want to discuss certain subjects, with their children on their own terms. Couldn't you say the same thing about religion? Like, if anything, and again, I say this as a devout Catholic, there's no shortage of support for Christians. I know there's this whole idea that like, Christians are being marginalized and silenced in this country. It's just not true, because the power structures aren't there, right? The power structures do not, no child is struggling with their Christian faith and has no one to talk to, and their family doesn't understand them, right? I'm sorry. An 8-year-old, I'm sure there's been plenty of stories, but on the whole, there's not a lot of 8-year-olds who are secretly Christian and trying to wrestle with this and their family. No, if you're an 8-year-old and you're a Christian, your whole community is Christian. You have no shortage of support there. You already have cultural hegemony. By contrast, and I talked about this in my video about this show removing the transgender storyline, is, trans children are trans, whether the parents are want to discuss this with them or not. So being able to have representation, and especially if you look at the cut content, it was this really elegant way of explaining without words what it feels like to feel like a stranger in your own body. That would be, I would imagine, and again, I say this from my removed vantage point as being a cisgendered man, I feel like that would be really important. Just for to begin your self-conception of what it is you're even experiencing. I feel like that is a lot more important. And also, it doesn't really matter what the parents want, what subjects they want to discuss with their children and at what times. Whereas religion, that's a really big concept that maybe you should be saving. And that's one of my criticisms of the Catholic Church, that, we just we baptize babies and then we kind of just send them into Catholic school and whatever. And it's like this idea of you're supposed to be willingly choosing when you're a conscious adult, a rational adult, choosing the faith. And most of the church, at least the Catholic Church, are people who are very passive and they were just baptized, right? That seems more like something that, you parents should prefer to discuss at a later date on their terms and timeline, right? So again, it's just a complete hypocrisy. And here's again the thing: I'm not bagging on Christianity. This is not a critique of Christianity or religion. This is a critique of Disney deciding what is appropriate for children and what is not. And more so, because really it's not about what everyone thinks is appropriate. It's about what a specific segment of the population thinks is appropriate. Being Christian and being trans are not mutually exclusive, right? You could have this show and have Lori be a Christian, and then you have this other character, I forget their name, be trans, right? So it's a bad look when you decide to keep one, because I'm sure both were conceived of from the beginning. I don't think they cut the transgender part and then added the Christian part. I'm sure these were both there from the beginning. But again, the fact, like both of these can be and should be featured, because it makes the story more diverse and interesting and have different kind of lived experiences. But the fact that they kept one and cut the other really illustrates where Disney's priorities lie. And it's just really sad and unfortunate. And I've become very zealous about this in like the past year or so. I don't know why. I've never been super, I grew up Catholic, so I kind of, probably was transphobic's maybe the wrong word, but like didn't understand it, and therefore was kind of like, that I don't really support that. That doesn't really make sense. In like the past year, I something is just like clicked, or maybe the past couple of years. And so whenever, if you watch this channel, you know, like anytime this comes up, I just get really upset because it's just so obvious that Disney, who who a huge part of its fan base is the queer community, in the past year, Disney's really shown their true colors. And I don't care how many Pride nights they have at Disney World and how many first openly gay Disney characters that they have, because there's been like a bunch of first openly gay. I don't care, because you're showing, because when it comes to money, if it's you only will support these communities and these ideas and issues when it's convenient, and the second it's not, they throw it out. Okay, let me grab a quick drink. Actually, let me just do this plug. Well, while I'm here, let me do this plug. I have another YouTube channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these like cartoon versions of myself. It was a lot of fun to make, and I think the video was a lot of fun to watch, so definitely go check it out. Let me know how you disagree with everything I said. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Literally, this is literally related in a sense to the last story, so talk about a segue. Okay, let's talk about story number 4. So the Disney Plus series focusing on Tiana, I believe it was just going to be called Tiana. And if you notice, I just used the past tense. Why not saying it is called Tiana? And why it was called? Well, that's because this show focusing on Tiana, which of course, who of course is the first and only Black Disney princess, the show has been canceled. This is reportedly part of a larger move away from long-form streaming content, and they're taking the material that they had developed and it's being retooled into like a Disney Plus exclusive short form special. So I'm really upset they're doing Tiana dirty this way. So as a character, you know, so she first appeared, of course, in 2009's The Princess and the Frog, which got, you know, really pretty strong reviews, but kind of middling. It was kind of a middling commercial success. It was kind of the forerunner to Frozen and Tangled, but Tangled's really where Disney went, oh, okay, going back to our Disney princess roots works, and then Frozen, of course, was just a huge phenomenon, right? Though one of the biggest issues with the movie, and one of my biggest issues with the movie, is, you know, this is the Disney's first Black princess, but she's a frog for most of the movie, so which was really disappointing, and to see, and apparently this kind of, I don't know if this film started the trend, but there's this kind of like running joke about how like anytime there's an anime movie with like a Black main character, there's like a non-zero chance, like a pretty high chance that the character is going to be like magically transformed into something else for the duration of the movie. So like that Spy movie with Will Smith doing the voice, and he gets turned into, I think, into a bird. Pixar's Soul, you know, he's partially, you know, turned into a cat for most of the movie, right? Like, or like a little blue soul orb or whatever. And on top of that, not only not really having the Black princess be Black for most of the movie, it really tepidly explored any racial issues. Again, Disney, you know, never wants to really make any strong statements about anything because it's such a huge company. It just wants to do the lowest common denominator. You know, there's like a couple moments that kind of allude to it, but those moments are more about her. It almost feels more misogynistic than racist. Though it could be. It's been a long time since I've watched it, but I'm sure even if I'm wrong, I can't imagine those moments that bring light to racial issues are particularly cutting or insightful, right? And you know, the character, again, 2009, so it's about 15, now 16 years ago. You know, the character has been pretty. Her presence has been pretty sparse, right? You know, within the media empire that is Disney. But of course, her role in that empire was re-emphasized or re-established in 2020, right? Of course, this is in the midst of huge Black Lives Matter protests following the murder of George Floyd, and a huge racial reckoning for like every company. This is when all the companies are posting the black squares, and then as we see now, 5 years later, they're just throwing diversity efforts out the window. But one of the effects that Disney that this had on Disney was they took Splash Mountain, which was based off of partially based off of Song of the South, which is like their racist movie that like you can't, they don't sell or make available anymore. You have to like find it on YouTube or like a bootleg. They decided we're gonna retheme Splash Mountain to Princess of the Frog themed, and it did end up getting rethemed in both Disney World and Land, being named Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And another thing was that they announced this Disney Plus show, this musical spin-off series, again, I believe called Tiana. And again, it was going to be, I was excited because presumably she would actually get to be a black woman, right? She would actually, we would actually get to have that representation. So canceling this show just feels like it's just a bad look for Disney. And like I've talked about earlier in tonight's show, as well as just on this channel, it seems, again, they seem to be ditching this push for diversity. Again, Bob, the thing I always go back to, Bob Iger being like, oh, when he came back as CEO, he was like, our films have become too focused on political messages. Disney films are the most devoid of political messaging films ever. Or at least controversial political messaging. Because, of course, everything is political. Even if it doesn't seem political, that just means it's politics is the status quo. But I resent that quote, because then what is the political message? That these marginalized communities exist? Right? Or should be showcased? Because if there's no other message. It's just a standard movie, but they just the characters or the casting is diverse. So at that rate, what you're saying is the message is, all the message could even be is that we should make movies focused on these communities. So if you're saying these films, we've gone too focused on political messaging, you're saying that is not a mission or objective worth pursuing. And again, they made these decisions back in 2020, during all of the valid racial reckoning of that summer. But now, again, it's a different political, social, cultural climate. And they've decided they don't want, to do this anymore. And again, they could be telling the truth, right? That this is a part of a larger move away from long-form streaming content. But again, the only other thing that was announced to be canceled was a feature film project for Disney Plus that had not been announced yet, right? So we don't even know what it was, but something was being developed and it was canceled. Not related to Princess and the Frog, presumably. So no other shows are being canceled. So it would make, this would be a little more believable if there were like a bunch of these shows that had been announced and then they're canceling them. So like the fact, even if that's the truth, it's just a really bad look that it's like we're canceling, the only show we're canceling is this show focused on our one black character. And again, that's another thing that it's like the fact we have to have a black Disney princess, in the sense that it's like, here's all the princesses and then here's the black one, right? No one goes, oh yeah, Snow White, the white Disney princess, or Cinderella, the white Disney princess, right? Again, whiteness is the default. And then you have Mulan, who is not a princess in the story, but in terms of the branding, she's like our Chinese Disney princess or Asian Disney princess. Raya is our Southeast Asian Disney princess, right? Like we can only have one of all the other racial ethnic groups, but we can have as many white ones as we want. Though, maybe hope against hope. Could this lead to a proper theatrical sequel, right? Because notably Moana 2 was originally developed as a Disney Plus series, and then they decided we're not going to be able to make as much money on streaming. Let's make this a movie. And that worked out really well for them. Moana 2 made over $1 billion despite pretty middling reviews and songs that I have not heard a single song from this movie. Like even on social media. So like a pretty forgettable movie all around. Could this happen for Princess and the Frog? My heart hopes yet, but my heart hopes yes, but my brain says no, right? That I'm considering the character is not super popular, which is kind of a chicken and the egg. Do they not use her because she's not popular, or is she not as popular because they don't use her? Who's to say? But also considering the original film was not a huge did not do very well financially. It like made a profit. It broke even, but it was still pretty weak, considering what Tangled and then Frozen would end up doing, right? So I'm a little skeptical of that, but you know, it's just a shame because again, I would just love to see, you know, see more of this character. I put like this sussy version of her. I gotta say, not to be misogynist, I'm just gonna go like lizard brain right now. Tiana and Belle are the hottest Disney princesses. And if you disagree, you can let me know in the comments. But they are the hottest Disney princesses. With Tiana might be the top one. Some comments here. Viviana has a couple comments, so I'm just going to read them all in succession. Viviana writes, I think the only thing was a woman of your background. Oh yeah, that part in Princess and the Frog when they're like, oh, a woman of your background has, you know, would have her hands full managing a business like this, right? Viviana continues, I can't think of anything else that is explicitly about race. Even her childhood friendship is framed like she's just not rich like her friends, not why she's not as well off. That's so insightful, right? Like the story does draw a contrast, but it's more class and doesn't really explore, well, why is she lower class, right? Viviana also says her mother being the seamstress of the family and they wouldn't be friends if her mother wasn't employed by the family. Viviana's just dropping bars here in the live stream. You guys, other viewers, you gotta drop some bars in the live chat. Viviana's killing it right now, but totally true, right? Like the film, it's like there, but they don't want to wrestle with it. And I don't think they put those elements in there as commentary. I think they just put those elements in there because that's just how it would be in real life. And they're not interrogating the nature of that context. So again, it just seems like a huge missed opportunity, but maybe I shouldn't even think of it as a missed opportunity because that's assuming that they would ever even really do anything interesting in the first place. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 5. So Sean Carter, a.k.a. Jay-Z, has sued the anonymous woman, I don't even know how you do that, has sued the anonymous woman who accused him of sexual assault. This is a malicious prosecution lawsuit of sorts. He claims that she and her lawyers, Tony Busby and David Fortnoy, had a quote-unquote evil conspiracy to extort him with the completely fabricated and wildly horrific, accusation. Tony Busby, the lawyer, responded, saying, quote, Sean Carter's investigators have repeatedly harassed, threatened, and harangued this poor woman for weeks, trying to intimidate her and make her recant her story. She won't. Instead, she has stated repeatedly she stands by her claims. This is just another attempt to intimidate and bully this poor woman that we will deal with in due course. We won't be bullied or intimidated by frivolous cases, end quote. So, these go back to those original allegations that I did a video about here on the channel. Back in October, this anonymous woman, the Jane Doe, if you will, claimed that back in 2000, when she was 13 years old, which is crazy, she was raped by Sean Diddy Combs, right? So this is all part of this larger Diddy, abuse saga. She claims that back in 2000, when she was 13, she was raped by Sean Diddy Combs along with 2 other celebrities at a VMA's after party. Again, she left the 2 other celebrities anonymous originally, but then later, I think it was December or maybe even January of this year, she later amended the lawsuit to include Jay-Z as one of the celebrities. Of course, Jay-Z vehemently denied the allegations, and more recently, back in February, the anonymous woman withdrew her lawsuit. There were some inconsistencies with her account. For starters, she said that there was a certain musician at the after party, not involved with the assault, but just there. But people have been able to prove that guy was not there. Like he was like on the other side of the globe at some other event. Also, she claims her father came to pick her up. She walked for a couple miles away from the party and then got picked up by her father, but that would have been 6-hour drive for him. So he says I would have remembered if that had happened. So there were some holes there. And Jay-Z's team, kind of used that as reasoning to kind of poke holes in the whole accusation, saying, quote, Doe, meaning Jane Doe, Jane Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Mr. Carter that the story brought before the world in court and on global television was just that, a false, malicious story. She has admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her, and that indeed it was Busby himself, whom she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston on the day of her maliciously false NBC News interview, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter in order to leverage a maximum payday, end quote. Busby then responded, quote, she has health issues. She has seizures. She withdrew her case. They falsely claim she recanted. She didn't. She hasn't. She won't, end quote. So Busby's argument is, and I'll give a quote from her in just a second, but basically his argument is she's just not in like the physical place to mount a massive accusatory lawsuit against one of the biggest and most powerful celebrities and musicians alive. Right. So all of this, I was going to do a story about the lawsuit being withdrawn, but other more interesting and bigger stories came up that week, so I didn't do it. But I'm glad it's coming up now because then I can kind of explore this idea, right? Did this assault actually happen? The lawsuit claims that and also, Viviana, I just see your comment here. Why would a 13-year-old ever be at a VMA's after party? Why aren't people protecting their kids? So, for viewers who are also interested, again, I talked about this in my original video. She was dropped off in Manhattan because the VMAs were happening at Radio City. She was dropped off in Manhattan and met up with a friend of hers. And they went outside Radio City seeing if they could get in, see if they see celebrities. And then Diddy Combs' driver noticed her and was like, hey, do you want to come to the after party or whatever? Because I guess she was like his type, I guess, right? Like, so to answer your question, it's really awful, but that's how she ended up there, supposedly, according to her story, right? But anyway, going back to this, the most current part of the story, Jay-Z's lawsuit claims, Busby's team was hasty and they didn't vet this woman properly. And they talk about how she had been in court. Within like 90 days of this lawsuit prior, she had been in court on mental health related issues. She had been charged with assault to the second degree. I don't know what that's all about. And the lawsuit also claims that she, quote, has several mental health disorders and takes multiple medications, according to her testimony from her psychiatrist, according to the testimony from her psychiatrist, laid bare in public court records, end quote. Which, like, okay, that maybe makes her semi-unreliable, but, it's not mutually exclusive. Like she could have all these mental health problems and have suffered this awful, awful assault. Like, those aren't mutually exclusive things. And one might argue maybe she has mental health issues because at 13 years old, she was raped by two of the most powerful people in the music industry. I don't know. She allegedly declined to sign an affidavit, though this affidavit was presented to her by Jay-Z surrogates, who just, showed up to her house. And she said, quote, I felt intimidated and terrified at being confronted by these two individuals on my doorstep, and that they knew my name and home address despite me being anonymous, end quote. So again, it speaks to how powerful celebrities are. Like, we just assume powerful people, not to go like full communist right now, but I feel like the reason why we idolize the rich and or like give them slack or assume like, oh, they must be good people or better people, like that's like they are rich and successful because they are really good people. I feel like there's a lot of reasons why that lie, and it is a lie, there's a lot of reasons why that lie permeates and takes hold, is because if not, it means, because I think on some level people know that it's not fair that I'm struggling to pay rent and this person has 8 mansions and 3 yachts, and right? It's fundamentally unfair. But if I believe, oh, well, they're successful because they're so much better than me, it helps kind of rationalize this, right? So we assume people with all this money and power will use it for semi, at least if not ethical, for at least within legal, within the boundaries of the law. I think that's just not true, right? And the fact that Jay-Z and his team were able to find out who she was, this anonymous, because he went to the court and was like, can we make her non-anonymous? And the judge was like, no. So the fact that his team was able to figure out who she is like very disconcerting, right? And again, like I said, the fact that she has these mental health problems does not, exclude her experience or immediately disqualify her allegations. Again, I have another quote from this Jane Doe saying, quote, "It is very alarming to me that Jay-Z's agents are looking for me and now know my whereabouts. Fear of intimidation and retaliation from Jay-Z and or his associates or fans is one of the reasons that I chose not to pursue the New York action and instructed my attorneys to dismiss it. Although I ultimately chose not to pursue them, I stand by my claims in the New York action and believe that I had a meritorious claim against Jay-Z. I was just not prepared to undergo years of attacks, intimidation, and harassment, and ultimately chose to dismiss my claims after certain negotiations among the attorneys involved in the New York action." End quote. So again, her argument here is basically like, these are powerful guys, and I just don't know if I can handle, what would be a multi-year, high-profile rape case, assault case. So the fact that she's withdrawn it could mean that it was all baloney, but it doesn't necessitate that, or it doesn't necessarily mean that. That could be an answer, but it could also be very true based off what she's saying, that she just did it because she just realized, she just felt, even if I were to be able to win this, it would just be so much that it just maybe not even worth it for me. Though my rule of thumb is always, when it comes to allegations like this, I try to believe women, right? Because just historically, people, women in these situations have been victims, and rarely are they making it. Like, again, what does she really have to gain? Like, people go, oh, she wants to make a big amount of money. Unless it's like secret. But if it's public, she's going to get all this attention and all this abuse and harassment. So I typically believe women in these cases, though it always helps if there's a lot of women unconnected, because then it shows a pattern. Like Harvey Weinstein, Diddy, the fact that there's so many allegations from so many different people at different times, different kinds of people, it makes it pretty clear that like the more accusers, the more likely for this to be true. So it doesn't help. This doesn't preclude this allegation from being true, but it doesn't help that this is just one anonymous accuser. If there were like 5 or 6 named women, I think it would be pretty obvious, or very, I would be pretty confident in saying that Jay-Z is a rapist. In this case, we don't know, right? Jay-Z, he was just so close to Diddy. Famously, he was the only one who was allowed to call Diddy by Sean, by his actual name. So how could Jay-Z be so closely involved with this Jeffrey Epstein level maniac? How could Jay-Z be so involved with this guy, and with this guy who's so dirty and not get a little bit of dirt on yourself, right? There's no definitive proof of fire, but there's just a lot of smoke here. And ultimately, I respect this Jane Doe's decision, but it would have been good for this to actually go to court, because then there would have been, evidence and discovery and cross-examination. Like the truth would have been borne out in the courtroom, hopefully, right? That's the idea, right? But as it stands right now, unless another major development happens here, we may never really get a full picture and understanding of what really went down, if anything went down at all. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give a plug to Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I publish reviews and musings from both myself as well as my good friend Jacob Baba. He actually just posted his review for Miggy 17, so definitely go check that out. You can find the link to that in the description below. You can also just go to your browser, type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, you should subscribe. I'm trying to grow this as best I can, so maybe one day, just one day, I can monetize this and make 33 cents off of this video, and my parents can be proud of me. Until next time, peace out.